First of all, Professor Dundu, thank you very much for your introduction. Guys, it's a pleasure to see you all here. I'm sorry I'm so late, but we had a slip up, and I've been sitting up at the other campus since 6:30 this morning until I couldn't find anybody and eventually started phoning around. So sorry for the delay. I'm going to go through this quite quickly. This slide presentation is not what I will leave it with you, and you can all get copies with it because there are notes pages that go with it. So let's get going. What I want to do is the following. I want to first talk about ECSA quickly, just so that you're aware. ECSA is a statutory body appointed by the government. It consists of 50 members, and they decide on policy and that type of stuff. Most of the work is done by volunteers from the Voluntary Association. There are 450 of us that do the work. ECSA staff is literally legal and admin. One of the most important functions, academic standards. All the academic standards, the standards that you are lecturing to, are set by the Engineering Council. It's the only body in South Africa that may do that, and we use academics from the universities to do that. Not only that, we then accredit universities as well, and to make sure that they keep up to standards and that we are worldwide. The second important thing is the professional development and registration. ECSA is also responsible for setting the standards for registration and for registering people. These are also international standards. They meet the international, what we call professional attributes. In identification engineering work, this is something new that's just starting. It's supposed to be in from 2000, but we still haven't got it in, where if you're not registered, you will not be able to perform engineering work. It's sitting with the Competition Commission at the moment, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen. Professional conduct is the most important part of registration. What the professional conduct says is you will not do something for which you are not qualified. In other words, it's up to you to make sure that you're qualified to do anything. So you will notice that at the Engineering Council, you don't register as a civil engineer or as an electrical or mechanical engineer. You actually register as an engineer or a technologist or a technician. And therefore, it says in your code of conduct, even if you're civil, you can do electrical, provided you make yourself competent. And you find in South Africa, because if you look at the municipalities and places like that, you'll have one engineer that has to do the lot. So it's a very important concept to remember. You are registering as a professional engineer, technician, or technologist. And with that, it gives you quite a lot of scope. Lastly, government liaison, and most important, international recognition. And I can assure you all our accredited programs here in South Africa have international recognition through the Accords, the Washington Accord for the engineers, the Sydney Accord, and the for technologists, and the Dublin Accord for technicians. The only reason for the names is that's where the agreements were signed. And we will be checked shortly again, and we've got people going overseas right now to check other countries. Right, let's move on. Categories that the Engineering Council does is the professional is the engineer, the technologist, the certificated engineer, and the engineering technician. I must just point out that the certificated engineer is a totally unique animal in the world. Nobody else in the world has a certificated engineer. And this shows you how advanced South Africa was. It was started in 1910 to protect people working on the mines. So we were way, way ahead of the rest of the world. We then get candidates for those, the candidates, and we've got a whole lot of new things called specified categories. These are people that need to be registered from the point of view of health and safety. And you'll find it's lift inspectors, lifting machinery. We've already got extras like the health, in the health side, medical equipment examiners and fire people, and all that are coming. And so these are what you call them. The main priority of the registration too is to protect the public from incompetent people. Right, let's move on. Why register? Professional status, very important. You look at the medical doctor. You can't work as a doctor if you're not registered. You can't work as an accountant if you're, but everybody can work as an engineer and call them an engineer. When I say engineer, I'm talking of engineer, technician, technologist. Marketability in gain, it is starting to work. In a lot of firms today will not employ people if they're not registered, and they definitely get higher salaries. So it's starting to work. Trust and recognition. I think that's the most important one. That if you've been judged by your peers to be an expert and recognized in your profession, that you know what you're doing, very important. And then the professional competence, that the public can know that you are professionally competent to do that work. Come on. It's a prerequisite in terms of existing legislation. You can't design dams, various things like that you can't do if you're not registered. You can't sign off documents if you're not registered. Statutory requirement to sign off documents and the new Building Act, and this work reservation. That shortly you will not be able to work if you are not registered, and it's coming. And this also applies to lecturing staff. You will not be able to, as Vice Dean said shortly, lecture or examine any subject that is involved with exit level outcome. You will have to be registered to do that. And lastly, the international recognition. It's amazing how much easier it is to register other places in the country in the world when you are registered. Right. And the last is, but most important, is it's only in the engineering profession we have high risks. A medical doctor is one person if he makes a mistake. With us, you saw what happened the other day with that plane that went in, 150 people. Bridge collapses or something like that. Ours is the only high-risk profession, and you need to be aware of that. And it's vital that you get this over to your students. This is why when we come for registration, we so look at safety and that type of stuff. Are you projecting safety? Right. I put this up because I think this is very important. People always ask, what's the engineering team? What's the difference between the engineer, the technologist, and the technician? I think the most important is the bottom line. It's different education and training, but of equal value to the team. A company can't work if they only employ engineers. Similarly, it can't work if it only employs technicians. You need all three. And in my view, the biggest shortage in South Africa is the technologist and the technician. They are far more short than we are of engineers. And the problem we're getting in this country, that a vast number of our engineers are actually working as technologists or technicians, not working as engineers. You'll notice the engineer, if you look at the column, analyze, innovate, create, develop. Engineer shouldn't be worrying about today's technology or today's things. He should be looking in the company 5, 10 years in the future. What new technology are we going to use? How are we going to use it? Where are we going to put it in? It's the technologist who should be running the company and doing the work and keeping it. He's the expert on the technology. And then your technician is there to assist him keeping going. So, and these boundaries are not fixed, you'll notice over, and an engineer often will work right down the bottom and the others, so the boundaries are not fixed. But it's vital that you get the right. If you look at the UK are talking of, for every one engineer you want 10 incorporated engineers or technologists and 100 technicians. In South Africa, when I did a survey about 10 years ago, it was 5 to 1 to 1, which is absolutely crazy. So, guys, we need you. Right. The engineering team, I'll put it up again, different but equal. In fact, if you look at people like Eskom and Transnet and Telkom and these people, they pay the same salaries today. And they aspire to the same posts. And the focus should be on the composition of having them there. Right, let's move on. The professional engineer, as I said, I just want to whip through these. The activities, the intensities, intellectual, analyze and solve complex problems, far more maths, far more physics, basic principles is what they keep knocking into the guys. And developing and applying new technology creatively and innovatively, and exercising professional judgment. If you look at the technologist, you'll notice broadly defined problems with proven technique and procedures. These guys, you guys should become the experts of today's technology. Developing, maintaining and managing today's technologies. And far more expert than the engineer. Exercising professional judgment and again managing resources. You'll notice the certificated engineer is exactly the same as the technologist, but one other thing, he's got to be appointed in terms of an act, in terms of the Occupational Health and Safety, the Mine Health and Safety Act, and the Merchant Shipping Act. There's 7 certificates, and in fact, a ship registered in South Africa can't sail out unless the chief engineer on that ship is a certificated engineer. You'll notice the technician, well-defined problem, supervisional, technical responsibility, contributing to the implementation, that type of stuff. Right. The professional development model, you first go and study it for an accredited program somewhere, whether it be engineer, technician, technologist. Once you meet that engineering standard, you can then register as a candidate and go through your candidacy phase, which in general is not less than 3 years of training and experience, but it must be the training in the right experience. We're finding today that 3 years in industry is not even enough, that most guys are taking 4 and 5 years to get the experience because they're not getting the training you used to get. Right, then you can meet the professional engineer standard and you can then apply for registration as a professional engineer or the professional technologist or the professional technician. The most important thing now is it doesn't stop. You've now got to go through lifelong practice, and every 5 years ECSA will send you a letter to say, have you maintained your CPD, and you're required to re-register. But it's very simple. We'll talk about it a bit later. It's not difficult to get, particularly you guys in academia. It's some of the type of thing you've got to keep up to date, your category 1, and that is very, very simple. Let's go on. I did say, I know I'm running late. If there is something that worries you, stop me immediately, but let's see how far we can go before we get the questions. Right, the procedure to register with ECSA. First, we recommend, particularly in industry and young people, to register as a candidate. The reason is because they get a mentor, and the mentor will help them. Applicants with non-accredited or non-South African qualifications have to go through this qualification evaluation, and I'll spend some time on that just now, and then we can talk about it later too. And the basic qualifications in South Africa for the candidate engineer is the BEng or the Bachelor of Science in Engineering, the technologist, the BTech, the certificate engineer, the certificate of competency, and the technician is the NDIP. The engineer does not have what's called the grandfather clause or the old route. They used to have it. It got stopped many years ago. The technician and the technologist, they still will take experience into account and even pre-experience. And in fact, still about 40% of technologists are registering with an NDIP and not even with a BTech. Yes, sir.
Sometimes foreign qualifications are like, which have like civil engineering technology. So under what category does it fall?
It will fall under civil. Technologist civil. From the point of registering, I'll come to that just now. Cover it for you. And the BEng and the BSc engineering exactly the same degree. It's BEng in the old Afrikaans universities and BSc in the old English universities. Right, how to prepare. We recommend register as a candidate. The most important thing, and that applies to everybody, acquire the necessary professional skills. And I'll go into each one of those in a bit more detail, very important. For industry, it doesn't apply to you people that much, but for industry, we have something like 4,000 commitment and undertaking agreements where the companies sign that they will assist the candidates to register and they will provide them with the right training. And some of them are very good, some of them are not that good. But even you guys, get a mentor. Get somebody who knows the system to help you. And that's what we can do, and we can talk more about that. But the most important one, it's your responsibility. It's not the company's or somebody else. It's your responsibility to make sure you get the right training. And I can tell you lots of sad stories. And one of the most saddest ones I've had. This was a guy who started in one of the big companies here as a labourer. They sent him to school, he got his matric. He then worked for a bit, they sent him back and he studied for his ND, became a technician, worked as a technician, they sent him back and he got his BTEC, registered as a technologist, and then went to university and got his BEng, and 4 years later he applied for registration and we had to turn the guy down. All he'd worked for was as a technician. And he was doing a very good technician work and the company kept using him. He'd never done anything more complex than that. Anyway, we went to speak to the company and 3 years later the guy registered because we moved him around with a lot of work where they got him to move him, and the guy got the right training. So make sure that you people don't get stuck and doing something with the training doesn't help you. It's very important. And then keep a record of your what we call RPD, any training or anything you do after your basic degree, any other record, because it's good, it all helps when it comes to registering. And then we also recommend joining a voluntary association that the Vice Dean spoke about it just now, like SICE or SIIE, because ECSA's job is actually to smack you when you go wrong. The VAs are there to assist you and help you, provide you with mentors and that type of stuff. Right. Registration requirements. Worldwide, it's based on 2 requirements. One is having the right academic level of education, doesn't matter which country you're in. And secondly, 3 or more years of the right practical experience. Notice, appropriate to the level of the category of registration. And that's very important. And it's no good you've got a BEng degree and you only work as a technician, then come and try and register. Similarly, if you've got a BTEC and you only work as a technician, you don't do BTEC work and you come and register, you don't have a hope. But we'll talk about that. Acceptable experience, design. You guys teach it, even to your technicians. You must be able to design. If you can't demonstrate that you can't do design, you've got problems. Planning. You must demonstrate in your experience that you can plan, that you have planned and you do planning. And we'll come to these in more detail. Synthesis, that you can synthesize a problem, pull it apart and find out what the problem is. That you can do the analysis, analyze. Very important. And then that you can identify the problem and that you can solve the problem. Now that's the problem at the level. And we'll talk about what we call a complex, a well-defined and a broad-defined problem. We want to see in your work that you apply the engineering principles you learn here at your university. We need to see some supervision leadership. We don't expect the guy to be an HR manager or something like that, but we expect him to demonstrate that he can lead a team of 2 or 3 people to solve a problem or to fix something or something like that. And responsibility. Guys, you must start carrying the can, and we must see that responsibility grow throughout your training or experience period. And lastly, not only lastly, but we expect you to have some idea of contracts and some idea of finance. Again, we don't expect a contracts manager, but we expect you to read up in a contract what's in it. That there's a start date, that there's a finish date, that there's a price to it, that it's got escalation clauses and then penalty clauses. That's the level you need to know. And the same with finance. Finance is a resource. How do you finance something? There's overhead costs, there's the direct costs, there's the material costs, that type of thing. So that's the level. We don't expect you to be a financial manager. And the code of conduct. Definitely we expect you to know that code of conduct, have read it and be aware of it and actually know what's involved in it. And as I said, to me, one of the most important things in there, besides the ethics and all the other things, is that you will not do something for which you are not competent. Very important. And safe, healthy environment. As I said, ECSA's one main responsibility is to ensure that you do not have incompetent people doing work. And this is the whole reason why we're pushing for registration. Safety, health and the environment. Again, we expect you to have an understanding of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. You don't have to be able to know it backwards like we expect with the with a certificated engineer and the Environmental Protection Act. Because unfortunately, as an engineer technician, or whatever we do good, we also do bad. And our one main job is to make sure that we do the best with a minimum damage to the environment. And the last one is that as a person, you now are legally responsible if something goes wrong.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.